Hello FBLA and welcome to the Preparing for Your Virtual Competitive Event tutorial. To start, we need to understand what our competitive event entails and be ready to meet those guidelines and follow the rubric for this competitive event. We will navigate to the FBLA website, which is on screen for you, fbla-pbl.org. If I pull up the live FBLA website, you want to go down to that middle section where it says FBLA High School and click on the blue Competitive Events button. This brings me to the FBLA Competitive Events page, and the first place I'm going to go is that Complete Competitive Event Guidelines for 2020-2021. When I click on the guidelines, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to page 3, which starts the table of contents. And what you want to notice here is that the table of contents is organized by event type, and then within each type, alphabetically by the event. Any event that has role play in the title, you can look at the competencies and you can look at the event guidelines, but you do not have your prompt until that prompt is released by Colorado FBLA. So check your date in your district call to conference materials to see when that role play prompt will be released. Anything that says presentation, you have the prompts for. So we are going to scroll down and go into presentation events with equipment so that we can see a couple of examples of how to prep for these events. When I click on presentation events with equipment, it takes me to that section, and it's important that I click on the section and not the actual event title itself, and here's why. The first thing you notice is an overview, eligibility, registration, and finals. So it tells you a little bit about the overview, but what's even better is this table right here at the beginning of the section that has all the events listed for that category and the time that you have for your presentation. So for instance, if you look at sales presentation, we can see that there's equipment setup time for 5 minutes. So there's no equipment setup time in a virtual setting. However, if we were in person, you would be allotted 5 minutes to set up your equipment, such as your Chromebook, your tablet, whatever it is. There's no prep time in this event, meaning you're not going to be given materials that you have to prep ahead of time. So your presentation starts right when you're ready, and then performance time shows that you have 7 minutes for this event. So in sales presentation in a virtual setting, I'm going to start my recording and start presenting my presentation, and I have up to 7 minutes to complete my entire presentation. Now remember, this is typically in person a role play where I would be working with a judge who would be asking me questions or giving me objections to my sale, that sort of thing. So I would have less to present in a virtual setting because I don't have those answers to the judge. So it's very likely that I might finish in 3 or 4 minutes instead of a full 7 minutes because I don't have that back and forth. So as long as I covered all the guidelines in sales presentation and covered all of the competencies and everything that I needed to, even if it's under that 7 minutes, that's okay. So now we know how much time is allotted for our presentation. We're going to scroll down and find sales presentations within the guidelines. So here we have sales presentation, and the first thing I notice is the event type is individual or team. So I can have a team of 1, a team of 2, or a team of 3. And then there's specific guidelines, and this is what I'm presenting on. And then you can see the remaining bullet points there give us the guidelines for that particular event. Now let's look at social media strategies, because this one has a topic. This is the topic you will use during your presentation for social media strategies. Now, lastly, before we finish here in the competitive events guidelines, we're going to scroll down to the bottom of that section. So here, this is the bottom of all of these presentations with equipment, and I can see some further guidelines that I need to make sure that I follow. Now, I'm going to click back and go back to that FBLA competitive events webpage, and then the next thing I'm going to look at is the rating sheets. When I click on rating sheets, now this shows me the rating sheets for all of the events. I'm going to go ahead and click on sales presentation. Now, when you look at the rating sheets, this is the rubric that the judges will be using to judge you. So in here, presents appropriate greeting. I'm going to look at that exceeds expectations column and see that the presenter is creative in their introduction and includes the product. So there's my first clue of what I need to do for my presentation. In a role play event, this is difficult online because you don't have that interaction with your customer. So you will have to act as both the salesperson and the customer answering those questions within your presentation. And remember, that's within that 7-minute guideline. Look for any penalty points that could be marked. So here's an example of FBLA Sports and Entertainment Management. And I brought this one up because it shows a demonstration of knowledge. So you can see that's 20 points on your rubric for talking about 4 or more competencies and that you're demonstrating within that project. And remember, demonstration is different than simply saying it. So last, back to that FBLA competitive events website, I want to point you down to the FBLA objective test competencies and task list. So when I click on this link here, here are the objective tests with documents showing the competencies for each of those. So if I go into business communications, for instance, this shows me the competencies that are required for this particular event. So those tell me the topics that will be on the test for the FBLA business communications test. You're presenting online virtually by submitting a video recording of your presentation to the portal, and the judges will watch the video. So when you are presenting in a video, there are a few things you want to make sure that you cover. The first one is you need a strong introduction. An introduction includes your name, the name of your school, and your event. If you're in a team, it's a good idea to have everyone introduce themselves by name. You also want to have a strong introduction statement. And then in the middle of your presentation, you want to have your topic sentences. And this is where you're going to have those competencies and those guidelines. You'll create those topic sentences or paragraphs, and then you'll wrap everything up with a summary and thank your judges. Remember, in business communications, you want to be concise and clear. Now, tips for presentation. First things first is you have to practice. Without practice, you will not be comfortable in front of that camera, and it is very clear who practices and who doesn't. And then on the topic of practicing, you want to practice out loud. So physically saying the words and using whatever gestures you're going to use. It's uncomfortable talking to yourself, say in your bedroom or in the bathroom or in the car or wherever, but it works. And we want to have time to work through those awkward sentences or words that we have a hard time pronouncing because we can say them in our head, but then we try to say it out loud and it becomes hard. So practice out loud so you can get all of that stuff worked out. Now, when standing, you want to stand still, but not like a statue. So be mindful of things like swaying or bouncing, talking with your hands. This is a great tip. Look directly at the camera and not at your screen. There is a big difference between when you're recording directly to the camera, which is maintaining eye contact with your judges, versus looking at your screen, and now they can tell that you're not looking directly at them. Smile and relax. You want to make sure that you don't come across as being grumpy or mean or overly stressed on screen. Speak confidently. This includes your volume, so make sure you're not too far away from the microphone, not too close as well, and make sure you're speaking up so that we can hear you. Speak confidently and speak up. Maintain good posture. Make sure you're standing up and not slouched and slouching forward, leaning on one leg at a time. Don't lock your knees. So make sure that you've got good standing posture while you're presenting. Also, when using vocabulary, we talked about this in the guidelines, say the actual term and then give the explanation about how your presentation addresses that skill or competency. Use an outline, but don't write out your whole presentation. So if you accidentally skip something, you could just move on to the next bullet point on your outline. Whereas if you skipped something when you practice word for word, our brains start searching for that next word, and then we get left with filler words like and and oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's where we get lost and we start to fumble. When working with a team, when your team member is speaking, give them your attention. So look at them, or at least look in their general direction. Just like you would in person, you want to mimic that online. Note cards are okay, provided you glance at them and don't talk to the note cards. Remember, talk to your camera, not your notes. And then also back to team members, ensure smooth transitions from team member to team member. Some tech tips: practice using your tech. So just as you're going to practice your presentation, you need to practice using your technology. This is something different for us. Also, make sure you're close to the camera, but not too close. If you're too close to the camera, it gets distracting. We can start to see your pores. It really just takes your presentation out of context. But you also don't want to be across the room, shouting at the camera across the room, trying to get your your point across. So make sure that you're close, but not too close. When possible, use a non-distracting background. So something nice behind you. It could be a wall. It could be a wall with a painting or seated in a nice corner. But you don't want to be like overlooking the entire living room where you might have someone walk by and distract your judges throughout your presentation. Lastly, use some good lighting, and here are some tips for lighting. When lighting, we like to see 3-point lighting. So don't go out and buy this equipment just to have it for your presentation. Use what you have around your home. A lamp is perfect. I use a $5 clip-on light from Lowe's. These don't have to be fancy camera lights to make them work. Use natural light when available. Natural light has that yellowy, orangey glow that makes us look good on camera. What's critical is make sure a light source is in front of you and not behind you. Because if it's behind you, like a window behind you, then the camera gets focused on that light and it creates a dark shadow over your face, and then we can't see you. And that's distracting as well. Warm lighting, which is more yellowy, is better than cold lighting, which is more that harsh bluish white light. So if you have that available to you, use warm lighting. Lamps work really well. Take a lamp, take the shade off of it, turn it on, and there you go. If you're getting glare, diffuse your light with like a piece of paper. Often photographers will use a piece of wax paper and put it over the light source. Make sure it's a cold light source and not one that emits a lot of heat as to catch your paper on fire. But that will soften that light for you and create a much softer look so that it's not glaring in your face. So that concludes my tips and tricks on preparing for your virtual competition. Good luck, everyone, and I hope to see you in finals.